Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
On a Monday morning, it's July 27, 2026. Hope you're having a great day. Moving through this last week of July. I can't even believe it. Where did the month go? We are with you every day. Thanks be to God and God willing, and we'll keep you informed as to what's going on in the Catholic world and beyond, hence the name of the program, Catholic Connection, of course. And a few birthday greetings before we give you the rundown and the interviews you can expect from us today. First of all, our very own Father Mitch Pacwa, happy birthday, Tanta Agore, as we say in Italian. Also celebrating a birthday, he's joining us this morning, Matt Swaim from the Sunrise Morning Show and The Journey Home. Happy birthday to you. And then Tom Price, of course, you know him from EWTN's Open Line and his mellow tones and the great voiceover work that he does for the network. And he is a longtime radio guy who's been in the biz. Well, we don't want to say how long because we've been in the business, I think, generally as many years. We always talk about this in our old days in secular media. But he has a great background in radio. And, you know, it's such a great thing to celebrate the folks at the network and all the great work they do. So just a wonderful day to say thanks be to God for all the contributions of Father Mitch Pacwa, Matt Swaim, and of course, Tom Price. So again, Tanta Agore, wishing them all the best. We did mention that Matt is joining us about 15 minutes past the hour. We'll talk about the Journey Home highlights. And we'll also check in. We have two segments this morning. I'm very excited. One of my favorite bishops from the US of A, the wonderful Bishop Thomas Paprocki. He put out a very beautiful but very simple, easy to understand letter regarding the importance of funerals in terms of the right way to celebrate a funeral in terms of the Mass, what's correct, what's not. And we'll also talk to him if we have time about proper Eucharistic reception. So those are two very big issues. And he does such a great job of this. He has an excellent background in canon law in addition to great experience as a priest and a bishop. But he does it in a way that we can all understand, and it makes sense in terms of what the church gives us, and especially with these new, I wouldn't say new guidelines, it's just kind of updated and reaffirming what the church teaches. Everything goes back to the dignity of the human person. And sometimes people may feel slighted if they can't do something in church during the funeral mass, but this is all about the sacredness of the human being. And so we'll have Bishop Thomas Paprocki explain this. There's also a very good story on this related that we're going to be bringing to you in the news, and it's also on EWTNnews.com. So if you'd like to read that article as we prepare for the interview or have it with you as we're interviewing Bishop Thomas Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois. He'll be joining us, as I mentioned, for two segments starting at 28 minutes past the hour, and then he'll stay with us till the rest of the program. Gail Buckley, our scripture verse of the week lady, the wonderful Bible lady, she will be back with us next week. She's on vacation right now, summer vacation. Second hour, hour number 2 on EWTN's Radio Extra. So, of course, we know, and we'll have a story on this, the Holy Father talking about the importance of grandparents over the weekend with the Grandparents' Day and celebrating over the weekend the feast of St. Anne and St. Joachim, the grandparents of our Lord, and Mama Mary's parents. And I want to mention some new research that's out on what can help people age gracefully and age well. And you know what? It's not that complicated. It doesn't involve any type of medicine or surgery. It's very simple, and it's something we're not doing enough, all of us, regardless of our age. So we'll discuss, and it's something that I'll probably dive into even a little bit more deeply from an Italian perspective in terms of lifestyles in Italy when we get to our Wednesday, God willing, Shrines and Wonders segment that we do every week. After our 2 cent segment, the one, the only Bill Donahue from the Catholic League is joining us. Now, bringing him on mainly because there was an article that came out last week. It was published in the Catholic Herald over in the UK. Hasn't gotten a lot of play here yet, but I wanted to get Bill's take on this. Father James Martin is openly on his outlets calling for gay priests in the church. So in addition to that discussion, I also want to talk to him about the mayor of New York. There's a new petition, and you'll hear this in the news as well. That was a petition drive that was just organized by family members of 9/11 victims. So we have the 25th anniversary coming up in September, and they're saying that they do not want the mayor of New York, Mamdani, there. So we'll discuss with Bill, who's a native New Yorker and on top of all these different decisions in terms of what's happening in his area, but everything that affects us, of course, as Catholics. Weather-wise, we have heat expanding across the desert Southwest, the plains, the Mississippi Valley, and the Midwest for the rest of the day today. We have fire weather concerns continuing for portions of the Intermountain West. Active, heavy moisture is fueling thunderstorms over the Southwest, and that means possible flash flooding. And we have a tropical cyclone in the Pacific that should weaken as it approaches Hawaii. And then we'll keep you up to date on that regarding dangerous surf swells and rip currents that are expected there. It's a Monday. Thanks for tuning in to EWTN's Catholic Connection. 5 minutes past the hour. Let's get started with your news on a Monday here on EWTN. Well, the Vatican is reporting, their Vatican News, I should say, Borgo Lazio C is set to be the setting for a moment of prayer promoted by the Center of Laudatio Si for Higher Education and the Andrea Bocelli Foundation. On July 29th, which will be on Wednesday, an international choir of 164 children and young people from 5 areas around the world impacted by crises will come together with the Pope in an event where music becomes a universal language of peace. The event, Canticle of Peace, is part of the celebration marking 800 years since the death of St. Francis of Assisi. The Holy Father will lead a moment of reflection and prayer, petitioning for peace in the world and taking inspiration from the Italian saint's text, of course, of the Canticle of the Creatures. One of the most important parts of the event will include music by Andrea Bocelli and voices of choir from his foundation accompanying that time of prayer. More than 160 singers will come from the Holy Land, Uganda, Haiti, and Italy, bringing their diverse backgrounds, Vatican News says, and their stories, often characterized by war and challenges. However, their voices are a testament, the Vatican says, to the power of music and art as languages of dialogue, hope, and reconciliation can be understood around the world. The Pope, meanwhile, yesterday also renewing his urgent appeals for peace in the Holy Land and across the Middle East, this during his Angelus address in Castel Gandolfo. He's still expressing deep concern over the escalating violence and calling for an immediate return to dialogue. He says, I continue to follow with deep concern the ongoing and escalating violence in the Holy Land, noting that many civilians have recently fallen victim both in the West Bank and in Gaza. Again, he called for a return to negotiations aimed at achieving a just political solution founded on the equal dignity and equal rights of every human person, and for the rejection of further military actions and unilateral decisions, particularly those that violate the respect due to and the status quo of the holy sites of every religious faith. Meanwhile, the U.S. pausing its airstrikes on Iran for a second day as diplomatic efforts to end fighting push forward. President Trump saying he is still deciding if he'll restart major combat operations in Iran. This comes as the U.S. and Iran have renewed attacks against one another despite the recent ceasefire agreement. And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is warning Iran against attacking his nation of Israel. Appearing on Fox Sunday Morning Futures, Netanyahu vowing that Israel's response would be very forceful.
If Iran attacks Israel, either directly or through proxies, either with ballistic missiles or UAVs or killer drones, it will make a terrible mistake.
It comes as Netanyahu is set to visit the White House this coming week as the president again weighs his military options in Iran. Tomorrow's meeting will mark the first face-to-face talks between the two since the Iran conflict began in late February. Again, as we reported earlier, it also comes as the president said he is close to a decision on whether to launch another major attack on Iran. And speaking of that conflict, it's nearing 5 months now, and a new survey of over 2,000 respondents showing that roughly 80% believe the Trump administration has struggled more than expected. About 2 in 10 respondents of the CBS News YouGov poll said the war has gone as smoothly as anticipated, but only 4% believe the administration has had an easier time. When President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu launched the campaign back in late February, Trump predicted it would take 4 to 6 weeks only to dismantle Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Lisa Ratobala reports several families, and we mentioned this earlier, and we'll be talking with Bill Donahue about this next hour. Several families of 9/11 victims are starting a petition to have the mayor of New York City banned from the ceremony marking the 25th anniversary of those terrorist attacks.
Organizers accuse Mayor Zohran Mamdani of supporting groups and individuals who have been critical of America and being sympathetic towards radical views. The New York Post reports the petition was started by Giovanni Galante, whose 29-year-old wife, Grace, was killed during the terrorist attack at Ground Zero. A spokesperson for City Hall said Mamdani still plans to attend the ceremony to stand with victims. In New York, I'm Lizzie Radabali.
A synagogue that was destroyed in the Eaton fire in California in 2025 has been vandalized for the second time in a year. Anti-Semitic graffiti was found on a mural at the Pasadena Jewish Temple in the center that had been painted by children just 3 months ago. The mural created in response to an earlier graffiti incident at the temple in January, but Rabbi John Ratner said it stood for more than that.
This mural was created not only as a response to a previous incident of anti-Semitism, vandalism that happened right here, but it was also meant to be an expression of our solidarity with the Altadena community.
The January incident came on the one-year anniversary of the Eaton fire that destroyed the temple. The Eaton fire was the second most destructive wildfire in the history of the state of California. The L.A. County Sheriff's Department now says they've begun a hate crime investigation. And funeral services for Senator Lindsey Graham set following his death earlier this month at the age of 71. Tomorrow, his remains will be brought to the U.S. Capitol Rotunda for a private service, which will be followed by a funeral service at the Washington National Cathedral. Then, on Wednesday, the longtime Republican lawmaker's body will travel to the South Carolina State House, and then a procession will be held as his remains are taken to First Baptist Church of Columbia. Graham will then be laid to rest in a private family burial in Pickens County. And the death toll now stands at 3 following a shooting near Seattle's Space Needle last night. Seattle Assistant Police Chief Tyrone Davis says officers were nearby when it's believed that 2 people began shooting at each other.
They were right there. They heard the shots and confronted the suspect that they saw actually shooting and stopped that shooting from continuing.
4 other people were hurt, including a 2-year-old in the shooting that occurred during the Bite of Seattle Food Festival. Davis says 1 young person has been taken into custody. Police are looking for a possible second suspect, and 2 guns have been recovered. Tammy Trujillo tells us Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers are reportedly planning a massive operation in Ohio to arrest thousands of Haitians who are losing their temporary protected status.
The TPS program is designed to allow migrants to live in the U.S. if it's too dangerous for them to return home. The Supreme Court recently sided with the Trump administration that the status could be revoked for Haitians and others. There are some 300,000 Haitians in the program here in the U.S. The roundup could begin this week, according to Fox News. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Firefighters in France and Spain now struggling to contain massive wildfires there. France saw flames that first broke out last week near the Atlantic coast at the fire, now less than 10 miles from the main entry points of the famed wine-growing region of Bordeaux. Around 220,000 people have been evacuated. Meanwhile, in nearby Spain, flames have burned more than 123,000 acres of countryside in Avila, making it the biggest wildfire in that country's recent history. Some 75,000 people in that area were told to leave their homes over the weekend. And the Federal Open Market Committee is opening a 2-day policy meeting on Tuesday. That's tomorrow, of course, with an announcement on interest rates due the following day. And most analysts see the nation's central banking holding rates steady at 3.5%. And the wait for a second bridge between Detroit and Canada, if you're heading to the Midwest for a vacation, has finally come to an end. The Gordie Howe International Bridge opens to vehicle traffic today after 8 years of construction and over 25 years of planning. We just passed it last night on the way home from visiting our grandnieces. It looks amazing. We'll be right back. Happy birthday to Mateo Tantagore. Okay, so how many people have wished you happy birthday already this morning? It's only 9:16 Eastern Time. Good morning.
I don't know. I can't tell, Teresa, because when I look on Facebook, it's, I feel like I'm entering into boomer territory because now I can't figure out my notifications on Facebook.
Hey, stop it.
So that's how old I must be.
You're talking to a boomer. That's
I know.
mean.
Well,
it's true, but it's mean.
I'm 47 today, and
you're a baby.
Some people refer to this. I refer to myself as mid-century modern.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. It's a great age. It's a good time.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm looking at the bio of the guest this evening on the journey home, and I'm thinking, I don't know why I haven't had her on the program yet, because I love the Ethics and Public Policy Center. I have a lot of folks on. But she looks amazing in terms of her bio. Wow.
Yeah, Erica Bachiochi she's got a fantastic story. She is one of the brightest and best that we have as far as the church today in terms of understanding Christian anthropology and how it responds to questions of feminism, questions of the sanctity of life, questions of just what it means to be a human being. This is the big question for a lot of people. And it was a big question for her. She wasn't raised in any kind of faith at all. And she had a couple of friends in her life commit suicide. And if you don't believe in anything in particular, your world is secular materialism, and then some people decide that they don't want to go on in that world anymore.
Yep.
That causes you to ask some serious questions about, why am I here? What am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
Should I stick around? And so this was if you want to kind of talk about what the major issue was that drove her search for meaning and truth from her youngest, kind of young adult days. I mean, that was the question. And it's a question that, like, in the world of nuns, this is a major question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
and we're seeing this more and more, and there's a lot out there, and I know you follow this, different people on TikTok and other social media outlets that are really questioning their upbringing, looking at the big issues in life.
Yeah. And, the big issues have to do with not just should I live or should I die, and what is my purpose in this world, but they also have to do with who am I? And, she asked this question in terms of feminism, and that's a big part of her story as well. But as you well know, I mean, this is, people who are questioning whether they were born in the right body or not. That's the question they're asking. We have the answer to those longings, but for her, religion wasn't in the picture for a while. Interestingly enough, and you'll find this fascinating. I mean, I did certainly. So she was in college, getting really excited about doing all kind of the feminist club stuff, and went to a debate between a pro-abortion feminist and a pro-life feminist. And I actually don't even recall. I wish I could remember who it was, because it's probably somebody that you and I well know. But I can't remember who was on the pro-life side of things. But she walked away from the debate. And this is so interesting, because you and I think, because we are on the side of the culture of life. And so often we're just continuing to find more and more and more arguments that support what we know to be true. But she wasn't in that world. She sat through the debate and was like, I don't agree with anything this pro-life woman said. But she was clearly happier than the person who was espousing my position. And that stuck with her.
Yeah.
Like, how is it? I don't agree with a single word this woman says, but she seems like she's happy. And the people who hold my view seem miserable.
It's so interesting that you should bring that up, because that's what started me back on the pro-life path, because I fell away from the faith and just considered myself, I wasn't radical about it, but I considered myself pro-choice until I had to sit down and do an interview when the state of Michigan was trying to decide on a matter regarding welfare-funded abortions. And so way back in the 80s, we still have to get this, both sides of the story. So I brought in a pro-life nurse who's still a friend of mine today, Diane Trombley with Right to Life Lifespan in southeastern Michigan, and another woman from local Planned Parenthood. And what amazed me was how calm and peaceful Diane was, and how angry and irritated and agitated and insulting of the other guest, this woman from Planned Parenthood was. And that stuck with me and started me to really think and do some more, soul searching on that topic.
Well, I mean, I think this is you talk about the lessons that you can take away from these stories. Well, first of all, I hope that someone who's like Erica hears Erica's story, because that's really who these stories are for, in terms of why we share them in such a way, is so someone can see like a path out of their worldview into a more life-giving worldview. But also for those of us who have such a dark battle to fight in regard to the culture of life, that sometimes we can get into that, sort of desperate and angry and frustrated. I mean, we look around what's going on and to realize that we have the high ground. Like, we have the life-giving worldview, and sometimes showing that, sometimes there's a pro-life witness that can happen in the arguments that we have, but sometimes you just being there with your beautiful, large family in a grocery store and having something good and true and beautiful that other people are like, man, that looks kind of cool.
And
like,
speaking of big
witness.
families, she has 7 beautiful children.
Yes.
Big family.
She does.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think she was part of that discussion that was going on a couple of years ago where it was like, they were trying to pull all these women who were involved in various things who, were trying to respond to the idea that, if you have a bunch of kids, you're just throwing your life away and you're not going to do anything interesting in this world. And she was one of the, the folks that was kind of brought out to illustrate, like, hey, you can be a legal scholar and expert on Christian anthropology doing tours of the college circuit, but also be like a completely fulfilled wife and mom. So,
yeah.
By the way, I co-host a show with another person like that. I don't know if you've met Anna.
I was just going to say that. Anna Mitchell. Look at her accomplishments. And she has a mother of 5, right?
Host.
Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you, when did she start looking into Catholicism? Because it's one thing, as you mentioned, to question and to wonder and to think, gosh, where am I going? What's going on? Why is this person so happy with whom I disagree so strongly? When did she start looking into Catholicism?
Yeah, it was in the midst of, kind of that academic soup of trying to figure out, I got to study more. And for these academic folks that we work with who come into the church, we didn't work with Erica because she came in all the way back in 1997 and the Coming Home Network was barely existing. But sometimes it's a personal pursuit that manifests itself in professional work. And it's really hard when you listen to her story to separate out her professional formation in academia from her personal journey, which makes it kind of all the more compelling to hear someone who is so invested in this question that they were willing to take out student loans to figure it out. That's a kind of a cool affirmation that, this is not just someone who's getting there and reading off a piece of paper about how you should live your life. She's got skin in the game.
Yeah. The Register did a beautiful piece on her. This is a couple of years ago. I'm doing research for the show with you this morning. I think it came out, and I'm looking at the date here,
It'd be 2022. Like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe?
Yeah. It was posted. Roxanne wrote it. Roxanne Sullivan. She's a wonderful writer and speaker. December 15th, 2022. Yeah, so it's a really nice piece on the Register, and the headline reads, Erica, I'm thinking it's...
You're going to say it the Italian way. That's not how she actually pronounces it.
Bocciocchi, because the CH in Italian, I was just telling you, there's a town we visited this time around. We were in Italy called Chioggia. No, it's Chioggia. It's CH, Chi. Bacchiocchi. So there you go. Anyway, so it's a really good article. Erica Bacciocchi on being a pro-life Catholic, feminist, intellectual, and mother of 7. Our hearts long for the good. To me, personally, what I think happens is when you've been raised, and a lot of baby boomers went through this, myself included, and it drilled into your head that if you wanted a career, you had to give up everything else. You couldn't have children. It was limiting. You're going to be left behind. And you live your life that way, and you don't come to a new realization, as Erica did. You're shocked and stunned because you realize, if you're honest with yourself, what you were sold is a big fat lie. And then if you change, it alters everything, right? The whole worldview. And that's exactly what she went through.
Absolutely. And, the other thing, too, you mentioned the boomers who, lived through the sexual revolution and made all those mistakes on the front lines of it. And they have their own kind of unique way of responding to this. And then, of course, we have all kinds of folks from the millennial world who are doing a really good job of saying, hey, we don't want what our parents and grandparents suffered through.
Yeah,
but
I wonder why, right?
Yeah, Erica's Gen X. And, I think that provides this, this own unique perspective, because in Gen X, we hadn't really fully seen what a generation or two removed from the sexual revelation looks like. So that's a great perspective from her today.
Well, this is exciting stuff. Look forward to the program tonight, and look forward to speaking with you, God willing, next Monday. Matt Swaim, happy birthday, 47 years young on a Monday. We'll be right back. Sometimes when the church makes a decision or reminds us of guidance that we're supposed to follow as faithful Catholics, we may misunderstand, we may disagree, we may say, gosh, why are they doing this? But as I always say, you have to stop and pray and ask the Lord to guide you, and always give the church, right, the upper hand, and make sure you are saying, okay, this is the church. This is a one holy Catholic apostolic church handed down from our Lord himself. And the church is always concerned about what's good for us, and always concerned about respecting the dignity of the human person. That's why I thought it would be really important to bring His Excellency Bishop Thomas Paprocki. Of course, you know him well from his great work at the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois, and beyond. There's a wonderful article that you can follow, as I mentioned in the opening for the show today, that was published a few days ago on EWTNnews.com regarding how bishops in recent months are tightening diocesan funeral policies, emphasizing stricter adherence to the order of Christian funerals amid evolving popular practices at funerals that depart from church norms and concern visitations, eulogies, and cremated remains, among others. Your Excellency, I know you're very busy. Appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. How are you? Good to have you on the program.
I'm well, and it's good to be with you and your listeners, too.
So this is, I think, a really important guidance that we're reminding folks of this and also tightening it a little bit, because I know we were talking during the break, my husband being a deacon now for 14 years, it can get, and it's interesting because when your article came up, I was reading it, and this is exactly what my pastor, who's also a canon lawyer, by the way, does in terms of following and respecting the order of Christian funerals. What have you seen recently, Your Excellency? And you have a wonderful video that goes along with your letter that is concerning regarding the funerals.
Well, there are a few things that have crept into practice over the years. I'd say one of them is basically, I think it's due to our culture's discomfort with death. We just don't like to deal with it. We want to get it over with as fast as possible. So it's condensing what should be the vigil or the wake into just maybe a visitation an hour before the funeral Mass. And there's really three parts to a Catholic funeral. So there is the vigil of the deceased, which by definition a vigil should be the night before, and then you have the funeral liturgy, which normally is a Mass of Christian burial, but it could be also a liturgy without the Eucharist, and then you have the committal at the cemetery.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was a child, my uncle died, my mother's older brother, and it was a 3-day wake. As a child, I felt
they
like
did that all the time,
forever.
right? The wakes for 3 days. I remember when my grandparents died. Same thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It went from 3 days to 2 days to the day before, and then I think this is just since COVID, really. I mean, so many things got altered during COVID, and people got the idea that we can restructure things, and so I just saw this creeping in the last few years. Is not even to do the wake or the vigil, but to do it, just an hour. Before the funeral Mass. And there's all kinds of problems with that. One is that, people treat the church as if they're going to a social hall. They're coming in with their Starbucks coffee and their donuts and whatever, and then also the fact that, if you advertise that the visitation will be from 10 to 11 and Mass will be at 11, well, everybody comes at 10:30. And then this happened to me a couple of times where it's 11 o'clock, time for the Mass. And there's a line outside the door, people coming in to offer their respects. And so you either have to cut the line off, or in both cases, we just waited. And so we're sitting in the sacristy. It's 20 after, it's 11:30, and you're waiting for the line to go down. So, I mean, there's some practical difficulties with that. But I think the more important one is, I mentioned, just the people's discomfort dealing with death, wanting to get it over with. And I think having a wake, the night before, the vigil, an opportunity for people to come and offer their respects. I mean, not everybody can be there on the morning of the funeral. Many people work, but they want to come and they want to be there. It's one of the corporal works of mercies, burying the dead, not just literally, but also coming to offer support. And then I think people are short-circuiting their own grieving process. We need to grieve and to receive condolences from our friends and our loved ones, and to just try to do that an hour before, and that's a problem. The other problem that's crept in, I think, is with eulogies. Eulogies are not permitted. What is a eulogy? Eulogy is giving praise to the person who is deceased. And what a Catholic funeral is supposed to be is praying for the repose of the soul of the deceased who has died. I remember a few years ago when Bishop Robert Morlino passed away. He was a good friend, a bishop of Madison, Wisconsin, and went up to his funeral, and he left instructions for the priest who was going to preach his funeral. He said, "Don't canonize me." In the homily, he says, "I'll probably be in purgatory, and I want you to pray for the repose of my soul." I mean, that's really the purpose of a funeral Mass. And so, even there, again, the discomfort with death, changing terminology, just referring to, instead of a funeral Mass or massive Christian burial, people talk about a celebration of life, and instead of cemeteries, we have memorial gardens, and I think that itself is a problem, and just people's inability to face the death and the meaning of life. What is it all about?
At the end of the day, and you mentioned this in your video and your letter, it is all about respecting the dignity of the human being, correct, Your Excellency?
Well, yes, it's the dignity of the person, but it's also our belief in eternal life. I mean, cremation is another issue. Canon law says that cremation is permitted. That's fairly recent, only since the 1960s, but it still says that cremation is not permitted if it's chosen to express a disbelief in the resurrection. Well, I've never seen anybody come out and say that directly. Well, I want to be cremated because I don't believe in the resurrection. But it's implicit sometimes when people say, well, I just want my ashes scattered, somewhere. It's like, well, no, we're waiting for the second coming of our Lord, where our bodies will be raised up, and we will, like our Lord's resurrected body, we'll have a glorified body for all eternity. That's we say that every Sunday in the Creed. We believe in the resurrection of the dead. That's about us. And, I think a lot of people have kind of slipped back into the thinking of the ancient Greeks. They believe in immortality, but they think of the immortality of the soul. That's Plato. But a Christian belief is that we believe in the resurrection of the body.
Oh, absolutely. And we could talk about this. We have about 30 seconds we have to take our break. But the confusion out there and the fact that a lot of people don't spend the time that's needed to really understand why the church, and this is not just for the Order of Christian Funerals, but for many other things in our Catholic faith, understand why the church teaches what she teaches, or you see some big public display, for example, the funeral of a quote-unquote Catholic celebrity where their ashes are spread, totally violating the church teaching, and people say, well, it must be okay if this person is a prominent quote-unquote Catholic. It must be fine. We can do that too. More with Bishop Thomas Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield on a Monday. We'll be right back. I'm so excited. I'll be speaking in His Excellency's wonderful Diocese of Springfield coming up in September for a beautiful women's conference. You can check it out at my website, teresatomio.com, under events. We are speaking with Bishop Thomas Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois. And as I mentioned, there's a really good, very thorough report on EWTNnews.com that was posted on Friday all about the adherence, the importance of the adherence to the Order of Christian Funerals. And His Excellency Bishop Paprocki just issued a letter and also an accompanying video. Okay, you have to share the story with our listeners that you told me during the break, Your Excellency, about people just kind of like wanting to do their own thing and thinking the church, shouldn't be directing them at all. Tell us about that experience.
Well, yeah, since I wrote my column and I recorded a video of this, of our policies that are trying to address some of the abuses that have crept into Catholic funerals, I've been getting some pushback on that. And I got one letter from a person who wrote to me and said, who are you to tell me how to do my funeral? Oh my God. And I wrote back, I said, well, I'm the bishop, and it's my responsibility. I actually took an oath to uphold the teachings of the church and canon law, and to address any abuses that creep in. I said, you can do a funeral any way you want, but then it's not a Catholic funeral. If you want a Catholic funeral, the Catholic Church tells you this is the way we do a Catholic funeral.
And did that person respond to your initial response?
No, I haven't heard back yet.
Shocker.
So we'll see.
But part of this, I think, is people not really taking the time to read, maybe to ask questions of their own pastors or deacons in terms of, okay, what are the guidelines? What should I be doing in terms of a funeral or anything really in the Catholic Church? And understanding the same thing. We just did a big thing on IVF last week with Bishop Thomas and the letter that the bishop sent to the federal government regarding insurance coverage of IVF. If people don't understand, there's a lot of confusion about various teachings and think the church is being mean or too strict, and don't understand that it all comes down to the dignity of the human person and respecting this process.
Well, yes, I mean, that's a good point, to get to the underlying reasons. Why do we do the things we do? The vigil, for example. Well, the vigil, by its definition, is prayers, it's keeping watch. That's why we call it awake. In fact, it's keeping watch and praying. You have to go back to the phenomenon of having funeral homes and professional undertakers. That's fairly recent. And I mean, remember, we have a 2,000-year history in Christianity, and some of our practices even go back before that, and the Old Testament. But where you have people mostly dying at home, and then someone would die at home, and you would pray. The body would be there at home, and you would pray. You would hold a vigil until you would take the body then to the church and have the funeral. Well, funeral homes, as they developed, is interesting. Even the terminology of funeral home, it's kind of a replacement of our family home. And years ago too, you'd have the person, the wake would take place in the parlor of the family home. Well, some places call it a funeral parlor. So even the terminology reflects the fact that the professional funeral homes, the funeral parlors, were like extensions of the family home. And so what are we supposed to be doing during that time? We're supposed to be praying. So again, traditionally, my recollection of funerals, you would always have the casket open, people with a kneeler in front of it. People would stop and kneel and pray in front of the casket for the repose of the soul. And then you would go greet the family and offer your condolences. And I've been to several funerals or wakes recently where the casket is closed. It's over sort of in the corner, and nobody's even paying attention to it.
Wow.
But, it's this is not the whole point of vigil, of be praying. So what I've said in my guidelines is people really don't want to have the visitation or the wake beforehand, as we still should do the vigil. I've told my priests and deacons, if the family doesn't want to be there, you just go to the funeral home and pray privately, do the vigil privately, but those prayers should be said. And then more often than not, even if for whatever reason they decide they don't want to have a visitation, the family will come, and maybe the immediate family, and they will be there to offer those prayers for the vigil, the day before. But then you continue the whole dynamic of you bring the body into the church, and the great symbolism behind that is the body is a casket's wheeled in the church, is sprinkled with holy water, reminds us of baptism, how we were brought into the church when we entered in baptism, and then the white pall is put on the casket as a reminder of the white garment that St. Paul said, when you're baptized, you put on the life of Christ and you clothe yourself in the Christian way of living. All these things that have great symbolic meaning, so it's important for us to recall those. And then also with the other abuse that I mentioned earlier was with eulogies. I think almost every priest that I've talked to has some horror story of people getting up there and saying inappropriate things. And even if it is appropriate, oftentimes the family member who is trying to say some words of remembrance gets choked up, and it becomes very uncomfortable because they just can't get through it. So our practice now is we ask them to, if you can write out your words of remembrance, the priest or deacon will read them. And then if you want to have just everybody can say whatever they want, do that at the luncheon afterwards. I just had a funeral recently where they did that, and at the luncheon they had an open mic, and anybody got up and said whatever they want. Well, that's fine at the luncheon, but not in Mass after communion.
Mm-hmm. And what about the fact that in many of these eulogies we've seen this, and you don't obviously condemn a person, but there's all this praise of a person, basically talking about them being in heaven. And as Catholics, we know that is between that person and God, and there is a place called purgatory. So is there a lack of understanding on that as well, Your Excellency, do you think?
Yes, I believe so, because I've heard that, sadly, even from some priests or deacons who are preaching, they talk about, the deceased is in heaven now. Well, we don't know that. Only the Pope can proclaim someone to be a saint, and that's what it means. If you're in heaven, you're a saint, and so our prayers should be, I think, just the opposite. We're presuming that the person is in purgatory and is in need of our prayers to go to heaven. And if the person is already in heaven, well, then actually they don't need our prayers. They should be praying. They'll be praying for us if they're in heaven, interceding for us. But we don't know that for sure, and so we offer our prayers for the repose of the soul of the deceased. That's what that means. The repose of the soul is they're not at rest. If they're still in purgatory, well, they're not at their final rest yet. The final rest is in heaven. And by the way, being in purgatory, they are on their way to heaven. So purgatory isn't like a holding place. And you'll see what happens whether you go to heaven or hell. No, if you're in purgatory, you're on your way to heaven.
Right.
But it's a final. But the word means purgation or cleansing, purifying, before seeing God face to face.
Yep. Absolutely. Talking with His Excellency Bishop Thomas Paprocki and the new rules for his diocese, but also with the bishops. Several of them, thanks be to God, are helping us understand the importance of the funeral policies, emphasizing stricter adherence to the order of Christian funerals. And you can go to the Springfield Diocese website, also to EWTNnews.com. There are hyperlinks to the new rules and His Excellency's very clear and well thought out and put together video. Your Excellency, I came to really appreciate this even further in terms of the beauty of the Christian funeral, the Catholic process. When my father died in 2010, and his Mass was it was so beautiful. And the way everything was done was obviously, right in accordance with church teaching. And the eulogies were done at the funeral home, and it was just wonderful. It was packed. And the church, my father was very active in our parish and very involved in the choir. And then my sweet mom, Rosie, died in 2020, right at the height of COVID. And we could hardly do anything for her. Only immediate family were allowed to the funeral home, and we had to stay 10 feet apart. We had to go to the cemetery and sit in the car as the coffin was being lowered into the ground. It was horrible. I mean, it was one of the most painful things I've been through. And I kept thinking back, I kept apologizing to my mother. Mom, I'm so sorry. Thinking of my father's funeral, which was just such a wonderful day, glorifying day for God and for him. And then that. So when you have that experience of a proper funeral that has everything in order and you're following the beautiful church teachings, it is so powerful.
It really is. I did a funeral a few years ago for a man who had, just a week before I celebrated the Mass for him and his wife for their 50th wedding anniversary. And he had cancer. He was at the Mass for his wedding anniversary in a wheelchair, and he died like a week later. Aww. And then at the funeral, the widow insisted that the grandchildren they had these little shovels, and the grandchildren would help shovel some of the dirt into the grave. And I thought that was actually beautiful because rather than trying to shield the children from their grandfather's death and then wondering, well, whatever happened to Grandpa? No, she wanted to give them a message. Grandpa has died, and we're going to bury him now, and we're going to pray for the repose of his soul. And so these little children, it was really pretty moving to watch it. They're taking the little shovels and putting dirt in the grave, and they're burying Grandpa. And I thought that was really a beautiful expression.
Mm. And, it does leave an impact on you, because I remember when my grandfather died, my father's father, and we went to the funeral home, and as you were saying, that was when they had the 3 days, they had the wake for 3 days. And I remember I was very close to I knew all of my grandparents. I was very blessed, and I was very close to my grandfather. And I went up to him in the coffin, I kissed him. And it wasn't even odd to me. It didn't scare me because I had been prepared, and I was so close to him, and everyone was there. And it was just a family. This is what we do.
Right, and so instead of hiding from death or thinking we're protecting our children by not telling them about death, I think it's actually the opposite. I think it's a reality. It's part of life, and part of growing up is to teach them how to deal with the reality of death.
In terms of the pushback, and I'm sure in your position you get a lot of that regardless, but I'm sure you had some positive responses too that you're doing this.
Oh, yes, I have, especially from priests and deacons who have seen so many of these abuses, and particularly, and I didn't just do this overnight. I had long conversations with my Presbyteral Council, a council of priests, and with my Diocesan Pastoral Council as well. And it was actually Diocesan Pastoral Council that pushed us in the direction of not allowing words of remembrance or eulogies to be spoken by any family member to any one of these parts, either the vigil or the funeral Mass or at the cemetery. They just said, let people talk at the wake, at the visitation outside of the prayers or at the luncheon, but only the priest or deacon should talk. Because, again, there's just so many horror stories of people getting up there. Our policy had been, in the last few years, they had to have a script written out ahead of time of what they would say. Well, then people would get up at the time of words of remembrance, and they just put the script aside and they'd start talking. Well, that puts the celebrant in a very awkward position at the funeral. You're not going to, say something then, and people knew that. And so that's why we're just saying, no, the priest or deacon will read. If you have something you want read, we will read it for you. But, so I think the priests are very grateful for it, and I think in the end that So people, if they really understand what the whole point of a Catholic funeral is, I think they will appreciate too that we're not just kind of making this up as we go along, but this is something that has rich tradition, rich history, that is actually helping people grieve, and it is a part of also our trying to understand what is going on when a person dies. That's not the end of the story, and there's a lot more to be told in that story, and according to our Catholic faith.
And I always tell people, okay, you may have questions, you may have concerns, but have you read what the church is teaching on this? And 9 times out of 10, Your Excellency, when people write to me and say this, that, or the other thing, similar to what that man rudely said to you, but who are you to tell me? That's a classic, though. I have to tell my husband that. That's got to be amazing. Who are you to tell me? The bishop? Hello? But seriously, I think I tell people, look, have you read any of the documents? Have you talked to someone in the church about this? So we appreciate you. You're a wonderful bishop. God love you. Keep up the great work. Again, we've had a wonderful and very important conversation with His Excellency Bishop Thomas Paprocki from the Diocese of Springfield. You can find all the information on his website, of course, but there's also a hyperlink in our story that we posted on Friday. We'll be right back. To Richard and chatting with His Excellency as we were wrapping up before we let him go. That's got to be a classic. Who are you to tell me how to writing to the bishop and saying that? Mamma mia. All right. Okay, so hour number 2 of Catholic Connection coming up on EWTN's Radio Extra on our 2 cents segment is some really cool new information on how to age well, gracefully, and what is really good for us. And it's so simple. You wouldn't believe it. We'll tell you about it in 2 cents. Bill Donahue, the one, the only from the Catholic League, is going to talk to us about a number of stories. Last week, a report came out, and this was actually in the Catholic Herald in the UK. As I mentioned earlier, it didn't get that much play yet in the United States. Father James Martin openly calling for gay priests, and he's mentioned this on his website and a blog, and we'll talk about that. But also, given the recent news today that we discussed in our newscast, and will air again, regarding a petition drive that's now underway in the Big Apple in New York City, I want to get Bill's response because he's a native New Yorker and knows all about the situation with the mayor, Mamdani, who is still trying to find a way to arrest Netanyahu when he comes in for the meeting at the UN in September. And people, family members of 9/11 victims are very concerned about him being at the 25th anniversary of the terrorist attacks, which is this September 11th. So there, again, is a petition underway. So we'll discuss that and many other breaking news stories with Bill Donahue from the Catholic League. Talk to you in about 2 minutes on EWTN's Radio Extra. Ciao, ciao for now.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Monday morning. It's July 27, 2026, hour number 2 of Catholic Connection here on EWTN's Radio Extra. And we have a great lineup for you this morning. During our 2 cents segment, I really want to highlight what the World Health Organization is saying that can help really people prevent dementia, age well, age gracefully. Something so simple, doesn't require any medicine, any hospital visits, any type of drug, that might help you with this. And it's very simple, but we don't do enough of it. And there's also, I would say, a parallel story to that, talking about how to cause problems in your life, more problems in your life in terms of relationships, not so much aging, but damaging to us. So we'll describe this. Now, I want to kind of highlight this because one of the things that Deacon Dom and I have learned in living in Italy part-time, and I might even bring this up on Shrines and Wonders Wednesdays as well, this Wednesday, is the certain habits of the native Italians. Now, many Italians, when they came over at the turn of the century, brought that with them. They had that similar lifestyle. I'll talk about that. I even talk about this in my book, my first Shrines and Wonders book, and also in my book about my Italian mom, Everything's Coming Up Rosy. And it's something that they just started to live when they came to the United States, and many Southern Italians especially immigrated to the United States in the early 1900s. But a lot of us who have grown up in Italian-American families would do that for a while, but then we became, I would say, very Americanized and adopted a lot of American habits that aren't so great. We'll explain. But this particular habit is something that even the World Health Organization and so many other experts are saying is necessary for a happy, healthy life, and especially when it comes to aging and aging well. So that will be our 2 cents segment today on a Monday. And then so excited, as always, to have the one, the only, the dynamic Bill Donahue with us from the Catholic League. A couple of stories we'll discuss with Bill, including the latest in his hometown, the Big Apple, New York, the city that doesn't sleep. There's a big story that's developing, and we'll have it in the news for you this morning, as we did earlier, all about a petition drive that's underway to try to get the mayor not to attend, Mayor Mamdani, not to attend the marking of the 25th anniversary of 9/11, which is coming up, if you can believe it, in September, this September 11th. So we'll discuss with Bill, along with a story about Father James Martin, who, and this isn't the first time he's done this, but again is openly calling for gay priests in the Catholic Church. Alrighty then, before we get started with the news on a busy Monday morning, let's check our forecast. The National Weather Service is saying extreme heat along with severe thunderstorms today. Extreme heat continuing from the Central Plains to the lower Mississippi River Valley, over southeast Montana, and from Southern California into the southwest deserts. We have extreme heat warnings also remaining in effect there. Severe thunderstorms capable of strong to severe wind gusts and large hail possible across the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley today into this evening. We're expecting some big storms in southeastern Michigan as well. 3 minutes past the hour. Hope you're having a beautiful Monday. Thank you so much for staying with us here on EWTN Radio Extra for hour number 2. Let's get started with the news here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Borgo Laudato Si is set to be the setting for a moment of prayer promoted by the Laudato Si Center for Higher Education and the Andrea Bocelli Foundation. On July 29th, an international choir of 164 children and young people from 5 areas around the world affected by different crises will come together with the Holy Father in an event where music becomes a universal language of peace. The event, entitled Canticle of Peace, is part of the celebrations marking 800 years since the death, of course, of St. Francis of Assisi. The Holy Father will lead a moment of reflection and prayer, petitioning for peace in the world and taking inspiration from the Italian saint's text of the beautiful Canticle of the Creatures. One of the most important parts of that event will include music, Andrea Bocelli, and the ABF Voices of Choir that will accompany the time of prayer. More than 160 young singers, Vatican News reports, are coming from the Holy Land, Uganda, Haiti, and Italy, bringing diverse backgrounds and stories, often characterized by challenges they've faced. However, their voices are a testament, the Vatican says, to the power of music and art as language of dialogue, hope, and reconciliation understood around the world. Yesterday, meanwhile, the Holy Father renewing his urgent appeal for peace in the Holy Land and across the Middle East. During his Angelus address in Castel Gandolfo, expressing deep concern over the escalating violence and calling for an immediate return to dialogue, he said, "I continue to follow with deep concern the ongoing and escalating violence in the Holy Land, noting that many civilians have recently fallen victim both in the West Bank and in Gaza." He also called for a return to negotiations aimed at achieving a just political solution in Iran, founded on the equal dignity and equal rights of every human person, and the rejection of further military actions and unilateral decisions, especially those that violate the respect due to and the status quo of the holy sites of every religious faith. And the U.S. pausing its airstrikes on Iran for a second day as diplomatic efforts to end fighting push forward. The president saying he's still deciding if he'll restart major combat operations in Iran. This as the U.S. and Iran have renewed attacks against one another despite the recent ceasefire agreement. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warning Iran, meanwhile, against attacking his country. Appearing on Fox Sunday Morning Futures, Netanyahu vowing Israel's response would be very forceful.
If Iran attacks Israel, either directly or through proxies, either with ballistic missiles or UAVs or killer drones, it will make a terrible mistake.
This, as Netanyahu is set to come to the White House this week as President Trump weighs again, as we mentioned, his military options in Iran. Tomorrow's meeting will mark the first face-to-face talks between the two since the Iran conflict began in late February. And the conflict between the U.S. and Iran is nearing 5 months now, and a new survey of over 2,000 respondents does show that roughly 80% believe the Trump administration has struggled more than expected. About 2 in 10 respondents of the poll said the war has gone as smoothly as anticipated, while only 4% believe the administration has had an easier time. When President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu launched the campaign in late February, Trump predicted it would take only 4 to 6 weeks to dismantle Iran's nuclear and ballistic missiles program. Lisa Ratabali reports on this story, and we'll have more on this from our friend Bill Donahue. Several families of 9/11 victims are starting a petition to have the mayor of New York City banned from the ceremony marking the 25th anniversary of the attacks.
Organizers accuse Mayor Zohran Mamdani of supporting groups and individuals who have been critical of America and being sympathetic towards radical views. The New York Post reports the petition was started by Giovanni Galante, whose 29-year-old wife, Grace, was killed during the terrorist attack at Ground Zero. A spokesperson for City Hall said Mamdani still plans to attend the ceremony to stand with victims. In New York, I'm Lizzie Radabali.
A synagogue destroyed in the Eaton fire in 2025 has been vandalized for the second time in a year. Anti-Semitic graffiti was found written on a mural at the Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center that had been painted by children only 3 months ago. The mural created in response to an earlier graffiti incident at the temple in January, but Rabbi John Ratner said it stood for a lot more than that.
This mural was created not only as a response to a previous incident of anti-Semitism, vandalism that happened right here, but it was also meant to be an expression of our solidarity with the Altadena community.
The January incident came on the 1-year anniversary of the Eaton fire that destroyed the temple. The Eaton fire was the second most destructive wildfire in California history. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is saying that they have begun a hate crime investigation. And funeral services for Senator Lindsey Graham are set following his death earlier this month at the age of 71. Tomorrow, Graham's remains will be brought into the U.S. Capitol Rotunda for a private service, which will be followed by a funeral service at the Washington National Cathedral. Then, on Wednesday, the longtime Republican lawmaker's body will travel to his home state of South Carolina, where the State House will have a procession and will be held as his remains are taken then to First Baptist Church of Columbia. Graham will then be laid to rest in a private family burial in Pickens County. The death toll now standing at 3 following a shooting near Seattle's Space Needle last night. Seattle's Assistant Police Chief Tyrone Davis says officers were nearby when it's believed that 2 people began shooting at each other.
They were right there. They heard the shots and confronted the suspect that they saw actually shooting and stopped that shooting from continuing.
4 other people were hurt, including a 2-year-old in that shooting that occurred during the Bite of Seattle Food Festival. Davis says 1 young person has been taken into custody, and police are looking for a possible second suspect. 2 guns have been recovered so far. Tammy Trujillo explains immigration and customs enforcement officers are planning a massive operation in Ohio to arrest thousands of Haitians who are losing their temporary protected status.
The TPS program is designed to allow migrants to live in the U.S. if it's too dangerous for them to return home. The Supreme Court recently sided with the Trump administration that the status could be revoked for Haitians and others. There are some 300,000 Haitians in the program here in the U.S. The roundup could begin this week, according to Fox News. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Firefighters in France and Spain are struggling to contain massive wildfires. France seeing flames first break out last week near the Atlantic coast, with the fire now less than 10 miles from the main entry points to the famed wine-growing region of Bordeaux. Around 220,000 people have been evacuated. Meanwhile, in neighboring Spain, flames burning more than 123,000 acres in the countryside of Avila, making it the biggest wildfire in that country's recent history. Some 75,000 people were told to leave their homes in Spain just over the weekend. Rory O'Neill reports staffers for Senator Mitch McConnell say he's still working while he's recuperating.
Members of Senator Mitch McConnell's staff say the 84-year-old Kentucky Republican is still doing Senate business while in rehab following his admission to the hospital 6 weeks ago. The longtime lawmaker was hospitalized initially due to a fall, but then developed pneumonia. That info wasn't shared for about a month. The staffer's weekend statement says McConnell is improving in rehab and that updates will be forthcoming. I'm Rory O'Neill.
The Federal Open Market Committee opening a 2-day policy meeting tomorrow with an announcement on interest rates due the following day. Most analysts see the nation's central bank holding rate steady at 3.5 to 3.75%. Mark Mayfield tells us former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb says the agency does not yet have the cyclosporiasis outbreak under control.
He said during an appearance on Face the Nation that while the FDA has done well in tracing the issue to central Mexico and specific farms, the situation remains unresolved. Gottlieb added that officials cannot be certain the identified growing region is the only source of contamination. Federal and state investigators have linked iceberg lettuce from central Mexico to almost 2,000 cyclospora cases across 9 states. Those affected states include Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And the wait for a second bridge between Detroit and Canada finally coming to an end. The Gordie Howe International Bridge opening to vehicle traffic today after 8 years of construction and over 25 years of planning. It boasts more lanes and more scanner technology than the 96-year-old Ambassador Bridge. Tolls will also be cheaper. A pedestrian and bike path across the bridge is set to open up as well on August 5th. That is a pretty big deal. If you're ever in the Michigan area, you want to get over to Canada, Detroit and Windsor are right next door to each other across the Detroit Bridge, the Detroit River. But what's more important is in terms of moving items and products from country to country. And it's quite the accomplishment. It's actually quite beautiful. We saw it last night. We were visiting with the girls, Lily, Frankie, and of course Danica, and their parents, and they live in that area downriver, as we call it here. And we always pass the bridges. Boy, is it beautiful. Amazing. People can actually put things like that up, the talent it takes in those huge structures. I digress. More stuff coming up. Good stuff, by the way, and something you can do that's very simple to help you age gracefully and well. We'll be right back. "16 minutes past the hour on a Monday morning. It's July 27, 2026. I tell this story in my Italy books, Italy's Shrines and Wonders, especially in Volume 1, which came out last year, but also in my Rosie book, Everything's Coming Up Rosie, 10 Things My Feisty Italian-American Mother Taught Me About Living a Godly Life, and I believe I also mentioned it in my God's Bucket List book. When I was a little girl, one of my favorite things to do would be to visit with my grandparents, whether we would be traveling to the East Coast where my mother's parents still lived, or when they would come to visit us. And I'll never forget one of the first times my mother's father came to visit. He was gone. I went to school and I came back and I was like, "Mom, where's Grandpa?" "Oh, he's out walking." And I thought, really? That's interesting because it's not his neighborhood. He's not that familiar with it. It was his first time there. And he came back home to our house where he was staying with obviously my grandmother. And he was telling us about the neighbor down the street at the end of the block, an Italian family, the Fronteras, and he had struck up a conversation, and it would become a friendship with this gentleman at the end of the street that we didn't even know. And they struck up a conversation about the garden that this man was planting on our block and his family, and they would just chit-chat whenever my grandparents would come to visit. And I thought, wow, that's really kind of cool that Grandpa met this person. Never gave it much thought, okay? Fast forward, I don't know what, one of my first trip to Italy, which was with my husband, Deacon Dom, which was in our first one, I think it was 2001, so 25 years ago. When we stepped on Italian soil, Italian ground, we immediately noticed how comfortable we felt and how familiar the habits were to us because they were the same habits of our grandparents. Now, we see a lot of news, especially lately, and there's nothing wrong with obviously looking into what can help you physically or medically in terms of aging. There's great medicine out there. There's great support, all kinds of wonderful things that we can do, how we can watch our diets and drink lots of water. All that is great. There's nothing wrong with any of that. And some people may embrace a lot of it. That's fine if that's for you. But one thing that is very easy to do and doesn't require an appointment with a doctor, doesn't require any new medication, doesn't require a certain type of exercise, and it has to do with the simple fact of being social. So I thought about this because in doing prep for the show this morning, I always go to really good Catholic websites in addition to ours. For example, Alatia always has beautiful articles. And this was posted for Grandparents' Day, which of course we marked this weekend. This Grandparents' Day, the World Health Organization's latest advice, offering one more reason to spend a little longer time with each other and around the family table. Ask what your parents or grandparents had for lunch, and before you know it, you've traveled via the butcher who retired in 1987, the neighbor's new dog, your cousin's holiday in Spain, and an entirely unrelated story about the time your father got stuck in a tree, and somehow you really don't mind. This week, the World Health Organization sharing a refreshingly simple message. Spending time with other people and keeping our minds active may help reduce the risk of dementia. And as I've been mentioning all morning and teasing, as we say in the biz, this story, the article in Alatia, which is posted today, says the advice wasn't especially complicated. Stay curious, stay social, and keep your brain engaged. If you think about it, grandparents have been recommending exactly that for decades. If they haven't physically told us that, they've exhibited that and given us an example, as my grandparents did. And even when we go to visit my grandfather in Jersey City, he was never in the house, except for the dinner, whatever, to meet the family, okay. But I knew exactly, as I explained in my books, where to go find my Grandpa Tomio. They lived in Jersey City, just down the street from, of course, Hudson River. You could look across. My grandfather would walk me down there, and I watched the World Trade Center go up. That's how old I am, to give you an idea. But I would always see him. I'd go meet him there, actually, in the park across the street from their apartment building. He would be sitting there with other older men in the neighborhood. They'd feed the pigeons. They'd be talking. He'd be smoking his pipe, and I could smell it from across the street. But there was always a socialization involved. Just like he would walk every time he came to our home in suburban Detroit when we moved from the East Coast to Michigan, he was always socializing with people. My grandmother the same way. My aunts and uncles the same way. And this is, the great aunts and uncles especially, this is the lifestyle still in Italy, especially in small towns. And you see this also even in the big cities. And other cultures do it as well, especially European cultures. I'm speaking from my own experience as an Italian American, but I'm sure you have your own to share, whatever your nationality or heritage is. But think about it. Stop and think about how our grandparents, especially if you're a baby boomer, lived their lives. Now, in my case, my grandparents on both sides of the family, I'm 100% Italian. I've mentioned that before. An FBI, full-blooded Italian American. My husband, the same thing. My grandparents on both sides came to the United States from southern Italy in the early 1900s. And they brought those habits, those really good habits with them, which is why my grandfather, my mother's father, could always be seen walking and socializing. The same thing with my father's father. He was more homebound for physical limitations, but they were always around the table. They were playing cards. They were sharing stories. It was always something about discussion and friendships. And it keeps their mind active, remembering the good old days back in Italia or just sharing other family stories and news. Pope Francis, several years ago, often called grandparents the keepers of memory. And as this article says, again quoting this article from Alatia, the phrase becomes more beautiful the longer you think about it. He wasn't talking simply about remembering names or birthdays, but about something much richer. Grandparents remember the stories that explain who we are. They remember the people we've lost, the faith that sustained the family through difficult seasons and the little moments that would otherwise disappear forever. And now I've noticed this happening with my grandnieces. You hear me talk about them all the time. Liliana and Francesca, the identical twins, who are going to be 10, I can't even believe it, in September, and the baby, Danica, who's 5. Yesterday, we hadn't seen them, of course, since we've been in Italy. We went and spent the whole day with them. And the first thing we did after I ate them alive and squeezed them until their eyes practically popped out, they said, Aunt Trici and Uncle Dami, can we play a board game? I said, absolutely. So we sat down, we laughed, we played games, and then they started asking me, again, as they're doing more and more as they get a little older, asking me about their grandmother, my sister Donna, who passed away in 2016 from ovarian cancer. They want to know her, who she is, what she was, what she did. And so I started telling funny stories about her and sharing memories. And they were asking me about their great-grandmother. They only met my mom once before she passed away, and they were probably too young to remember. But I told them stories. Uncle Dominic told them stories about his family, and they're interested, and they're engaged, and they're so great. They don't want the cell phones around. They just want to learn about their family, and they want to laugh. They want to have fun. And these are the types of things that keep us all young and healthy. And it doesn't take a lot. I'll never forget that very first trip to Italy. One of the reasons we felt so comfortable is because of the socialization. And I'll never forget the fact that my grandfather, the first time he came to our home in Michigan, knew our neighbors better than we did. Socialization, loving one another, being together. It'll help you age well and gracefully indeed. We'll be right back. All right, the minute I saw this story, I said, hey, we got to get the one, the only Bill Donahue from the Catholic League on to talk about this. Bill, great to have you back on. And compliments to Mike McDonald on your staff, who filled in for you while you took a very well-deserved week off. He was great. And I was teasing him. I told him, I love your music. You're my favorite pop artist. I'm sure he gets that a lot. But anyway, he's fantastic. Okay, so let me read a little bit of your piece, your lead paragraph that you posted today. Father Martin wants more gay priests. And you can find this, of course, at thecatholicleague.org. Father James Martin, the gay activist, says we need more homosexual men to join the priesthood. He hastens to add that we are presuming a life of celibacy. Full stop. Such a presumption is not practically warranted. Okay. So here's the thing with this. I get increasingly frustrated, and we have to pray and love all people. I get that. With people who seem to insist that they have a better way than the church. I was just interviewing one of our favorite bishops in the first hour of the program today, Bishop Paprocki from Springfield, about the new rules, and updating and confirming the rules of the Catholic Church regarding funerals. And he had a Catholic in his diocese write him and say, literally, Bill, he said this to the bishop, who are you to tell me how I have to do my own funeral? He's the bishop, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but it'd be like a baseball player saying to the coach, who are you to tell me what to do? I mean,
right.
Everybody has to have leaders and rules. There are parents, there are children, there are teachers, and there are students. I mean, the narcissism of these people, the arrogance that they should be told by their bishop, can they belong to any organization where there isn't leadership? Hierarchy is universal, and that's the real problem. The radical egalitarians.
And it's the same thing with James Martin, and you and I were chatting during the break. What he really has a problem with, or with whom, it's God, right?
It is, because he really objects to, I've heard him say it himself, and he's very open about it, the Catholic Church teaches that the homosexual attraction is objectively disordered, and the acts are intrinsically disordered. He prefers the term differently disordered. That's the gravamen of the problem here. He wants more gay priests in the priesthood. He says they are called to be celibate. His father, Jerry Murray, just told me in a nice email exchange, he said he doesn't call them to be chaste. He calls them to be celibate. Well, they're not going to marry anyway, so what are they giving up? No, the problem is that the Church said under Benedict in 2005 that men who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies do not belong in the priesthood. Now, a McGrath Institute at Notre Dame pretty much said the same thing, and they also made a distinction between deep-seated homosexual attraction and those who were involved in a transitory condition. So a transitory might be episodic. It could be some passing kind of thing. Martin took exception to that, and he didn't like the idea that we should be helping men to overcome their sexual attraction to another man. He was angry that they didn't go far enough for him. So he's not even objecting to men with deep-seated homosexual tendencies being in the priesthood. I mean, this is just a lack of common sense, and it's also a rebellion against God. God made men differently, and men and women, and we're equal in the eyes of God in terms of the children of God, but you're asking here about policies. We would never welcome an idea of housing when you have a bunch of single men and single women living and working together. We would expect that there could be some problems there because the temptation would be too strong.
Right.
Why is it that Father Martin, at this late date, after all the damage that's been done by homosexual priests to the Catholic Church with the clergy sexual abuse scandal, I wrote a book about it, not all gays, but we know one thing, it was the gays disproportionately who are responsible for the problem. Not all gays are molesters, but most of the molesters have been gay. And that is something which is palpably true, and yet he's in rebellion against it.
Yep, we're talking with the one, the only Dr. Bill Donahue from the Catholic League. So he mentioned this in an essay he wrote in response to the McGrath Institute report, right? Yes, in Outreach, which is a publication that part of the ministry of him to the LGBTQ +++I people. I mean, look, I mean, it's amazing to me that he's fixated on this. He quotes Pope Francis is saying that he had met a number of gay priests who were good men. I have no doubt about that. No one's ever saying that every gay priest is a bad guy. But we are saying is this, the temptation is too real. And by the way, Father Martin does not talk about, I do in my piece today up on the website of the Catholic League, what Francis has said about gays in the priesthood. He doesn't want men with deep-seated homosexual tendencies in the priesthood. He agrees with the Catechism. He agrees with the Pope Benedict back in 2005 on this. And when a priest made fun of the fact that, well, it's just a different kind of affection, Francis exploded on that. No. We can't have this kind of affection in the priesthood. So if you want to quote Pope Francis on anything, just give him the complete due. Don't just selectively cherry pick what he says. Yeah. And again, I think going back to the main point of this is that he here is trying to get the church thinking that the more he puts this out there, and this is what I never understand. He's a priest. He was ordained. He obviously went to seminary. And you are not going to come along and change 2,000 years of church teaching on a core teaching of the church. And yet they think somehow if we put this out there enough, the church will say, oh, I should have had a V8, and we'll do what you think is correct. Yeah, I mean, and for him never to mention the fact that the John Jay studies, I read the book on this, shows that overwhelmingly 81% of the victims were male, 78% of them were post-pubescent. We never had a pedophilia crisis in the Catholic Church. That's a simple lie. Mm-hmm. We've had a homosexual crisis in the Catholic Church. And for him not even to mention that in his piece, to just say, like, he's oblivious. It's a sorry state of affairs. He's not going to win on this. As you correctly said, we've had this teaching consistent for thousands of years. He's lobbied very, very hard over in Rome to get them to change the language on this. He's not alone. Cardinal McElroy has also said the same thing at the Archdiocese in Washington, D.C. We have Tobin right across the river from me in Newark, who has said the exact same thing, that the church is wrong with its teachings on homosexuality. We shouldn't refer to people as being intrinsically disordered and objectively disordered. So this problem is deep in the church. But again, one would hope that with Pope Leo there, doesn't strike me as being a radical, that they're not going to make these kind of changes. I want to mention your book as well. There's a hyperlink to it in your terrific article that's posted today at CatholicLeague.org, The Truth About Clergy Sexual Abuse, Clarifying the Facts and the Causes. Before we take a quick break, I'm wondering, because I searched for this story, it was sent to me by a friend, and it's in the Catholic Herald, which of course is a UK publication, the Catholic publication of the UK, but I couldn't find too much about it outside of Martin's site on various news sites, and I think the reason is that if you talk about this, I think the secular media realize, and you have to address, they'll get pushback because of the problem with, as you just mentioned, we've had with the same-sex attraction of men in the church.
I think that's a good analysis.
I mean, why don't we see this all over the place? Because, and I think the media sometimes refuse to connect the dots there as well, and they don't want to talk about it, right?
Right. But it's simply dishonest not to talk about it. We know that boys who come from fatherless homes are disproportionately responsible for violent crimes in this country. There's nothing new about that. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with the family structure.
Yep.
So, I mean, people say, well, you're trying to demonize. No one's demonizing young men who come from fatherless homes. It's just simply saying that, you've got a problem here. And if you have a concentration in one neighborhood, look out.
Yep. More with Bill Donahue when we come back on a Monday. Thanks so much for tuning in to Catholic Connection. Always great to have Bill Donahue with us from the Catholic League, catholicleague.org. Dr. Bill Donahue, author of many wonderful books. Check it out at the website. Again, catholicleague.org. Okay, so we've discussed Father Martin. Now I want to move to another story, which actually is making headlines, and I think it's good that the media are at least covering this. I don't know how much coverage they'll give to it, but right now it's making headlines. Did a story this morning, Bill, on how there is a petition drive by some family members of victims of 9/11, and here we are in the 25th anniversary year, coming up, of course, in September, that they want to get enough signatures to try to prevent Mamdani from being overseeing, the big celebration for 25 years, marking this very important memorial in our country. Many people do not want him there. Have you heard anything about this in your neck of the woods in New York?
I haven't, and this is the first I've heard of it, but I will chime in myself. I've already been to some rallies with my Jewish brothers and sisters to end Jewish hatred. I've spoken at them. I'm a veteran. I'm concerned about this. The staff has put together a report, which we haven't released yet, about what was said about 9/11 by world leaders on all different sides and activists and the like. So we're taking this very seriously. 9/11's on a Friday this year. That Monday is Labor Day. And we're ready for it here. And no, these people should not be insulted by have someone who has a hard time condemning the Islamists like Mamdani. And he does have a hard time. And we put together enough things. We have a section on our website called Mamdani Watch, where we detail all the people that are working with him and what they want to do. They want to abolish the police. They want to abolish the prisons. They want to abolish ICE. They're in support of Hamas. Some of them have come right out and said that we cheer what happened on October the 7th of 2023. So he's been a little bit careful on that, but we know where his sympathies are.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me read you the story for our listeners and maybe just hearing this as well. Family members of those murdered on 9/11 have launched a petition calling for New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani to be excluded from the 25th year memorial events on account of his association with extremism and refusal to condemn anti-Semitism. The petition was launched by Florida realtor Giovanni Galante, whose girlfriend was among those killed by al-Qaeda terrorists on September 11, 2001. And Bill, it's already gathered over 5,000 petition signatures. Petition says concerns have been raised about Mamdani's political positions, associations, and responses to rhetoric that many perceive as hostile to shared American values. These positions include a perceived reluctance to clearly and unequivocally condemn phrases such as globalize the intifada. Also, many interpret as endorsing or normalizing violence. It also cited Mamdani's support of associations with individuals whose public statements or records are viewed by family members as dismissive of American institutions or insufficiently critical of extremist ideologies. They're serious about this. 5,000 people have already signed it.
There'll be 50 million by the time we're done with this, because I'm going to jump in on it as well. But yeah, they're absolutely right in everything they've said about this. He's been asked as recently as July the 18th, because I know that was my birthday, and he was in an interview with the New York Times by a very astute Hispanic woman who really made him look like the fool that he is. And he came right out there and, he was asked again, will you condemn the term globalize the intifada? In other words, make it worldwide, the jihad. And he won't answer it. And he says, well, I didn't say that, other people have. No, but we understand that. But other people who are close to you, who work for you, and got their job probably because of that, Why can't you separate yourself and say, no, they are wrong, but he will never do that? We know where his sympathies lie. And the people that he's has working for him started with this transition team, then it was inauguration, and now the people working for them, we know what side they're on. It's very clear. And I think that once more the 9/11 families find out about this, they're going to jump on board. This thing is not over. I think it's going to swell over the summer.
How could he stand there in good conscience based on what he said previously?
Well, he's very slick. You know, I used to think that he was, also bright, but he's not. He's very quick. I'll give him that. He's got some charisma. He's got some jazz. But when he was asked by the Hispanic woman from the New York Times to define the working class, and he couldn't do it.
I saw that. Mm-hmm.
He couldn't do it. Anybody who makes up to $1 million is the working class. So bartenders and landscapers and all these people, they're all working class, along with the guy who's the hedge fund manager. Mm-hmm. What is he, crazy? I don't think he's that bright. I think he just throws around these things as slogans. But look, his father's a Marxist. His mother's on the far left. We know that he owns 4 acres of land in a slave country in Uganda. That doesn't seem to bother him at all. But he saves all his vitriol and his hatred for the United States of America. It is building, though. I'm seeing that Jewish Americans, in particular in New York City, had a rally yesterday, and he's getting it now, interestingly, from the left, who says you're not radical enough. We got you elected, and we got all your surrogates elected. So why can't you deliver? Now he comes out today and says we can't go ahead with a property tax hike because of the economy, etc. Oh boy, yeah. I mean, he's going to get it from both sides. And meanwhile, on the front page of today's New York Times, there's an article how the Democratic National Committee is broke. They're $2 million in the hole. They can't pay their bills. The chairman is throwing his cell phone at people that now they have complaints against him. They're asking their vendors to wait until after the midterms before we pay you. Well, I don't know what's happening with the Democratic Party. It's crumbling, not just ideologically, but morally and now economically.
But why then are so many people, and I'm glad to hear the Jewish Americans, our brothers and sisters in New York City, finally waking up. And I mean, it is incredible, especially since Mamdani is talking about arresting Netanyahu when he comes for the UN meeting in September. I mean, seriously?
Yeah. Well, why didn't he fly to Washington now and they could arrest him there?
Right. He's coming to Washington tomorrow, so why not arrest him at the White House? Yeah.
But let me tell you something. I guarantee that when it comes, usually around the third week in September when they have the UN thing here, they tie up the traffic, that's how I remember. When that happens, he may not be demanding that Netanyahu be arrested by the police force, and of course they don't have the authority to do so, but he will be in support of his minions, and they will be there in front of the United Nations demanding that he be arrested. They're going to make a big stink about it, and they may even turn on him for saying that you promised that you would do the arrest. Once you raise people's expectations too high and then you don't deliver, that's when the fireworks begin.
Do you think it's possible to actually stop him from attending and overseeing the memorial? Here's some more information from the New York Post. Galante and other petition organizers hope to gather enough signatures to convince local lawmakers and the ceremony's organizers, the nonprofit 9/11 Memorial and Museum, to keep Mamdani away from the silver anniversary ceremony planned for the former Twin Towers site in Lower Manhattan. The petition, posted on change.org, cites a number of concerns about Mamdani, who is the city's first Muslim mayor, has promoted his religion since taking office in January. And the New York Post goes through a number of things, as you mentioned. Refusal to condemn, globalize the Intifada, palling around in the mayoral campaign last year with a notorious gay-hating Brooklyn imam who once urged followers to take part in gun-free jihad and march through the streets of New York City. The mayor's endorsement of a fellow Democrat Socialist of America, and on and on and on. As you mentioned, the interview in the New York Times. Do you think they can do this? Do you think they can say, no, you are not welcome here, this is not appropriate for you to be here?
I don't know whether you can just use moral suasion. The question is, who has the authority to stop him from presiding over the ceremonies? I know from researching him and what he said about 9/11, he was infinitely more concerned about Islamophobia following what happened than he was about what actually happened on that dreadful day. And he has no business being there, but he's bold enough. And you know what? He'll use this somehow with some backhanded comments to stick it to Jews. Look what happened when he was involved with the Irish on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. He took the opportunity to compare what happened to the Irish under the British to what the Jews are doing to the Palestinians today. He just can't get it out of his claw. If you asked him about ice cream, he'd start talking about Jews. I mean, this is the way the guy is. He'll find a way to rope it back to Palestine, which doesn't even exist. I mean, what is he talking about?
Right. And then we have, I was saying, telling my producer earlier that I was, my husband and I were coming home from the store yesterday. We were driving past my old neighborhood, which is in a very, very conservative area of southeastern Michigan. And I'm seeing all these signs for this Senate candidate, I believe his name is Saeed, who is a Muslim and who is backed by Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the whole, bunch who agree with that type of, so-called politics. And I'm thinking, what in the world? What in the world's going on?
Well, the last I heard, now you're probably closer to it than me. I don't live in Michigan, but last week we are following this guy because we just did a podcast on him. He's an epidemiologist, a radical guy. He was 7 points down in the poll against the woman who's running against him in the Democratic primary, which is August the 4th. We're keeping an eye on that. A lot of things are going to be decided in early August on this, across the country. So, but yeah, you see it here in New York. You see it in New Jersey. You see it on the West Coast, obviously. The guy who's taking Planter's place in Maine is just as crazy. So, there's a strong strain of radicalism that's in this country. The question is, are there enough of them to win? And when you have people like Van Jones and Bill Maher and
oh my gosh, and Van Jones, Bill Maher though was on The View not too long ago saying all of this, how bad it is in terms of communism and the Democratic Party.
And even got Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, and of course James Carville has been leading the way. So a number of people now are speaking up, and they're saying, wait, if the Democrats want to commit suicide, they'll hand the baton to Mamdani and his radical freaks. And the question is, will they do that or not? But I don't see enough leadership coming from the more moderate strain within the Democratic Party to push back against them. Whatever you might say about Nancy Pelosi, she did clip AOC's wings, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Schumer never did that, and now it's too late. Schumer has gone down tremendously in the eyes of New Yorkers.
So what should we as Catholics be doing as we move into the primaries and then the midterms right now, Bill? What do you think?
Well, the first thing we need... we need to do is inform ourselves about the truth about these people's voting record and the people with whom they associate here and the like. They've got to listen more, of course, obviously to EWTN and other Catholic radio stations and inform themselves of what's going on. But they also need to talk to other members. It's not just good enough to, let's say you have a family member or friend who's on your side. Okay, other ones, probably you have family members and friends who are on the other side. I don't expect people to war with them all the time. But the ones who are on your side, don't assume that they have all the intellectual ammunition. You have to give it to them and embolden them and to speak up and sign petitions such as the one that you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to monitor this because right now they already have 5,000 signatures getting back to the Mamdani situation with, of course, 9/11. I can't believe, Bill, it's been 25 years. I mean, you're right there in New York. Yeah.
And what's even more startling is that somebody whose sympathies are with the Islamists is going to preside over the ceremony.
It's just how in the world? I don't know. All right, my friend. Well, you are amazing. Okay, so what are you working on in addition now? I know you're going to be getting on top of this Mamdani story. What else you're working on at the Catholic League?
Well, also looking into the fact that he wants universal child care from the age of 2 right up to kindergarten.
Oh, you know why that is? Because they want to get them as young as they can, right?
Absolutely. And that's what the Catholic League is working on right now.
I mean, think about it. It sounds so wonderful, for working parents who obviously struggle and daycare is very expensive and we're going to help you. It's going to be just terrific. But they're going to get them and they're going to start brainwashing them as young as possible.
That's exactly why we're on it here at the Catholic League, and we're putting out a report on that very subject.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Thank you so much. Great to catch up with you. Of course, Dr. Bill Donahue from the Catholic League. And I know you have a report on the website regarding the situation with Father Martin. And then when can we expect to see a story regarding the situation with 9/11 and the ceremony? That's coming up this week.
We were going to hold it actually probably to about the last week in August to let it out about the week before 9/11. But now that if it's picking up some steam we want to help out these other people in the petition. So I may want to readjust my schedule on that.
All right. Well, make sure your schedule includes us because we want you to come
All
back
right.
on.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
my dear. You're the best.
You're
Bill
the best.
Donahue, CatholicLeague.org. And we'll be right back. Let you know what's coming up on a Tuesday. Stay tuned. All right, now my Italian's really up after, not that it isn't up all the time, but after talking to Bill Donahue. Coming up tomorrow, I don't know how many of us realize, of course, you're probably familiar with the month of June being the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, but July is the month of the precious blood of our Lord that we mark in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic faith. So our good friend Steve Ray is going to be joining us. We'll talk all about that. And as always, Steve will be providing us with so much insight into why the church does what she does when she celebrates these months or these themes. It's very important. And because he is so well-versed in Scripture, he'll also provide plenty of Scripture backup for this as well, in addition to our beautiful Catholic teaching. And then Kelly Solomon joins us for Newman Guide News. She is now with us in the first hour of the show versus this hour because she's been doing such a fantastic job with this segment that we discussed it and said, you know what, let's bring you in the 9 o'clock hour so even more people can hear you. So that's the show for tomorrow. Steve Ray on the Precious Blood, and then Newman Guide News. Oh, we're also going to be talking to, in hour number 2, Father Carter Griffin on self-mastery. How do we make ourselves more in tune with Christ and the teachings, and how do we have more self-control so we can accomplish those spiritual goals that we have to get closer to Christ and his church. Great show today. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. I get paid to learn more about the faith and to help all of us, of course, keep on top of the various issues in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic faith. And God willing, we'll talk to you tomorrow on a Tuesday. Have a great Monday. Ciao, ciao.